Today in the shop we're going to be diagnosing a 2021 F250 that won't crank over or start. If we turn the key to the starting position on this truck we get absolutely nothing. And I'm going to be using 4scan Lite on an iPhone today for diagnosis. We have a 2021 F250 with a 6.2 liter engine. Let's see what we have for codes in this vehicle. We have a P06E9 engine starter performance. Now that code just basically means the PCM powered and grounded the starter relay and the engine didn't crank over. And that is the only code we have in this vehicle. Let's do a quick visual inspection under the hood. And I think we've found the problem. A wire was installed into one of the fuse slots in the battery junction box, and the orange wire you see here, and the cover was never snapped back on properly. Not only was it not snapped down, but the back of it wasn't even latched properly. It was exposing a couple inches of fuses. And if you think about where that fuse box is, right in the corner there with overhang, and the hood doesn't actually seal watertight to the body, especially along the fenders, there's absolutely no seal. Every time it rains, water is just pouring off that fender and running into the box. And you can really see here some of the corrosion and some of the fuse slots on it. And the starter relay that the PCM controls is located internally in this box. It's soldered onto the board inside. Stick around to the end of this video. We're going to disassemble this box and see how much damage water can do to a box like this in just 9 months. And we are not done with diagnosis yet. This one gets a little more interesting. So, new battery junction box installed in the truck, no problem. Let's start it up. We turn the key and we still get absolutely nothing. PCM connector disconnected, and I've got pins on the power and ground for the starter relay. And on the power wire from the PCM to the relay, we're reading about 8 ohms to ground. So we're shorted to ground. After a little bit of playing around with this, I realized that I could wiggle the harness under the battery junction box and change the resistance of the short to ground. So I do believe we are going to be pulling the battery junction box back out. And what I found when I got the box out was, let me see if I can get the camera to focus on this and pull this connector out of the way so we can see here. We've got a place in the wiring loom where it is melted. So after getting the bracket for the battery junction box out of the way and a few other things, we've got a little 18 or 20 gauge wire in this harness that is completely melted. The insulation is completely burnt off of it, and it has melted most of the other wires together everywhere. Melted through the insulation on lots of them. There's all kinds of stuff cross-shorted and melted down in this harness. We've got a melted spot on the back of the connector for the bottom of the battery junction box as well. And with the cover off of the back of that connector, you can see here if you look real closely, there's a little 18 or 20 gauge wire there that is just completely bare. All the insulation is melted off of it. And it took me just a little while to figure out what had happened here or what the cause of all this was. And I tracked down that wire to the pin and then found the pin on the connector in the wiring schematic and figured out what it was. It's a ground for the primary side of a relay, and I think the relay was for the seats or something related to the seats. And I had never really thought about this before, but on a box like this, you've got a lot of 50, 60 or more amp circuits inside it. And with all those relays, there are a lot of ground circuits in there as well. And this box kept filling up with water over and over, and started building resistance on a lot of the connectors and the contacts inside the relays. Once it got to that point, all that resistance started building heat whenever current was flowing through those circuits. And when things get hot enough, the solder starts melting. And then you have molten solder rolling around in a box on a circuit board with 40, 50, 60 amp circuits right next to ground circuits. I think what happened is one of those larger amp circuits shorted to that ground for the primary side of that relay, which is normally what, a 2/10 of an amp circuit, 1/10 of an amp. It's an 18 or 20 gauge wire, and all of a sudden it's shorted with 40 or 50 amps going through it. It just incinerated the insulation on it, took it off and melted it down, and it was glowing red hot inside that harness and melting through everything that it was next to or touching. So the cause on this was water in the box originally. And I'm going to tear that box down in just a minute and show you the inside of it. But obviously the fix here is going to be to replace the entire harness, because there's just no way you're repairing it. That ground ran all the way up to the radiator support and melted into every wire that it came in contact with the full length of that harness. So you'd either be overlaying every wire in this box or I mean in this harness, not box. The easier fix is definitely to just replace the harness. So let's take a look inside the box and see what happened. It blows my mind that this box came off a truck that's not even a year old yet. I believe it's been in service for 9 months now. The amount of corrosion inside it and just water damage. And there's a relay that's pretty much been on fire. You can actually see a water line on all the relays and on the inside of the box, about 3/8 of an inch deep, or as I'm referring to it, the shoreline. And we got a couple of burnt spots on the bottom of our circuit board here, as you can see. And that's right under that one relay that's burnt. And I'm guessing that relay is probably what cross-shorted to the ground and probably really burned up the harness on the vehicle with the water damage in it and just the corrosion. If you found this helpful or interesting, please click the like button down below. I got a lot more great stuff coming up, so please subscribe. And as always, have a great week.